Hello. In this week's homework assignment, we saw a couple of really challenging problems, so I just wanted to follow up and go over them with you so you understood how we tackle them. You will be seeing stuff like this on the exam. Probably not this challenging, but it's still important to know how to deal with these. All right, so San Juan Industries recently reported a net income of 1.8 million and an EBITDA of 7.5 million. It had 2 million of interest expense and its corporate tax rate was 40%. What was its charge for depreciation and amortization? Round your answer to the nearest dollar. All right, so a couple things that I do when I go through a problem is I like to identify information that's I feel going to be important. Whether or not it's important, we'll discover that as we work through it. All right, so the first thing that catches my eye is the net income of 1.8 million. So I'm going to jot that down. The next thing is EBITDA of 7.5 million. And the next thing that catches my eye is the interest expense of 2 million. So by this time, I can get an idea of what resource I may need to solve this problem. All of these items can be found on one statement. Do you remember which statement? That's right, the income statement. All right, so maybe it has something to do with the income statement. Let's continue on with the problem. So tax rate is another thing that pops out. And then last but not least, it's asking for depreciation and amortization. All right, so we want to ask ourselves, what's the best way to tackle this problem? And I think the best strategy is to actually create an income statement. All right, we're given all these variables here, and we want to find just one of them. All right, so let's create an income statement and see where we're left after that. All right, so I'm going to set it up like this. We can refer to the example in the book to get an idea of what an income statement looks like, especially if you're not familiar or not comfortable with them. We can refer to the book for an example. So I'm going to go with the example in the book, and sure enough, first thing is revenue. Do we know what revenue is? No, that wasn't given to us. Then the next thing is operating expenses. All right, so those are normally deducted from revenue, but we don't know what that is either. So we're going to put a question mark there. All right, so revenue minus operating expenses is going to equal EBITDA. All right, now here's something we do know. So we're going to go ahead and fill in that 7.5 million that was given to us in the question. Then we're going to continue on until we're complete with the income statement. So after EBITDA, we're going to deduct depreciation and amortization. And we don't know what that is. That is the figure we want to figure out. So after that, we would equal EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes. Again, we're not sure what that is. All right, so this is going to be a problem for us because right away we have two missing variables. If we knew what EBIT was, we could figure out what depreciation and amortization is using algebra, right? EBITDA minus depreciation and amortization equals EBIT. All right, so that's a problem. So let's continue on building our income statement. The next thing that we would do is we would deduct interest from EBIT, and that is given to us. So we're going to go ahead and plug that in. So 2 million is what that was. And again, the problem told us that. And then once we deduct interest, we're left with EBIT, earnings before taxes. The problem didn't tell us what that was, so we'll go ahead and put a question mark there. And then our last step is to deduct taxes. All right, so we don't know what the tax amount is, but we do know that the percentage is 40% tax rate. It's our average tax rate that's given to us in the problem. So we're not sure what the actual amount is, but we'll just denote the percentage at this point. All right, then once we deduct taxes from EBT, we're left with net income of 1.8 million. All right, so we have a lot of missing puzzle pieces. So what we want to do is we want to start off with net income. And we can tell, even though we don't have a dollar amount for taxes, we should be able to calculate EBT because we're given the tax percentage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a formula that looks like this. So EBT minus EBT times our tax rate is going to equal net income. So the only thing I've done is I've taken what we've done here and I've converted it to a formula that we can actually use. So we don't know what EBT is, but we do know what the tax rate is. So we can go ahead and plug in what we know. So we know that our tax rate is 40%, so I'm going to keep that in decimal form at 0.4. And we know what net income is. And now we only have one variable, which is EBT. So we're going to go ahead and isolate this, distribute the 0.4, so we get EBT minus 0.4 EBT. If we reduce that, we're going to get 0.6 EBT. Remember, there's a 1 in front of this one. So 1 EBT minus 0.4 EBT equals 0.6 EBT. Our last step is to isolate EBT by taking 1.8 million of net income and dividing it by 0.6. And sure enough, that gives us EBT of 3 million. All right, so we can go ahead and plug that in. So there's our EBT plugged in. I'm kind of OCD, so I like to go ahead and plug in the other variable that we know, even though we don't really need this. All right, so let's move on. Our next step is to figure out what EBIT is. All right, so what is EBIT? So EBIT less interest equals EBT. So we have 2 out of the 3 variables, so then we should be able to use algebra to solve for EBT. So here's what that looks like. EBIT minus interest equals EBT. So plug in what we know. But before that, let's actually rearrange the formula to make it a little bit easier for us. So I'm going to take this interest and move it to the other side. That way we can isolate EBIT and hopefully make our calculations a little bit cleaner. All right, EBT is 3 million, interest is 2 million, so EBIT is going to equal $5 million. All right, so we'll go ahead and plug it in. Now we're left with one last step. We know what EBIT is, we know what EBITDA is. We have 2 out of the 3 variables, so we can create another formula just like we did before. It's going to look something like this. So EBITDA minus depreciation equals EBIT. Again, same concept as before. I'm taking what's given to us in the income statement, creating a formula, and plugging in what we know. I'm going to rearrange this as well. So I'm going to move the depreciation and amortization to the other side to make it positive, because I don't want it to be negative. I want to know what the actual amount's going to be. We know it's going to be charged. All right, then I'm going to take EBIT over to the EBITDA side by subtracting it, and we're left with depreciation and amortization equals EBITDA minus EBIT. All right, we're going to plug in what we know, and then we're going to solve. So once we take the EBITDA and subtract EBIT, our answer comes out to 2.5 million. All right, so that is our answer. Turns out we didn't even need revenue and operating expenses. The whole reason we started with that is because really we didn't know what we're going to need. So we filled in the puzzle pieces that we knew, and then we worked our way to what we wanted to know. All right, so let's move on to the other calculation question that was in the assignment. Organ and Tissue Corp had $55,000 in cash at year-end 2013 and $25,000 in cash at year-end 2014. The firm invested in property, plant, and equipment totaling $250,000. Cash flow from financing activities totaled positive $170,000. What was the cash flow from operating activities? Same technique as before, and you're going to want to get in the habit of this as you work through questions, is identify information that's going to be useful. All right, so first thing that pops out is that $55,000 that we had in 2013. We had $25,000 in 2014. The word that pops out to me is invested. That's going to be a very important word. So the firm invested in plant, property, and equipment totaling $250,000. So invested, keep that in the forefront of your mind. Then our last variable is financing activities that totaled a positive amount of $170,000. All right, so again, I'm going to look at all these things we've highlighted, and all of them have to do with cash. So I'm thinking this has to do with the statement of cash flows. So again, we can refer to that example in our book to help us out. We want to know what cash flow from operating activities is. The good thing about this is that we don't have detailed items, so we're dealing with main categories of the cash flow statement. All right, so let's set it up something similar to what we did before. We know that the cash flow is operating activities. We don't know what that is. That's what we're going to solve for. So operating activities plus investing activities. And in this case, investing activities was a negative amount of $250,000. Again, it's negative because we invested, meaning cash came out of the company. So there's a cash outflow of $250,000. So we're going to denote that with a negative sign. Plus financing activities, and that was a positive amount of 170, so we'll plug that in, equals change in cash. So we're not given change in cash directly, but we can solve it by taking the difference of cash between the two time periods that are given. All right, so we know what cash is in 2014. The problem said it was 25,000, and what we're going to do is we're going to deduct the cash that we had at 2013, and that was 55,000, and that's going to equal the change in cash. So when we do the math, we're going to get a negative amount of $30,000. All right, so we're just going to take that, transfer it up, and in this situation, we're now able to solve for what we want to. All right, we can create a formula that looks something like this. X is operating activities plus investing activities plus financing activities equals change in cash. So we're going to use algebra to isolate X and solve for the problem. So first thing we want to do is distribute the positive sign to get rid of the parentheses. Then what we'll want to do is add what we can. In this case, we're going to take the negative 250,000 and add 170 to it, positive 170. So we're left with negative 80,000. Then to isolate X, we simply add 80,000 to each side. And sure enough, we're left with operating activities in the amount of $50,000. So what that means is that we generated $50,000 of cash due to operating activities. All right, if you have any questions, please let me know. I really hoped that this helped clarify. Thanks, and until next time, take care.